Hello, my name is Nathan, and I'm here today to talk about some TypeScript. TypeScript is one of my favorite things, and it's because TypeScript does its best to help you, to try to help you as a developer. And not everyone sees it this way. When you start out learning TypeScript, it can feel like it's fighting you, or it can feel like you're fighting it, and it's trying to prevent you from shipping your app or completing a ticket or just getting things done. There might be cases where it's fighting you about something that isn't a big deal. The code's working and it's telling you that there's an error and you know that there's not, and that can be frustrating. And I'm hopefully going to shed some light on why that happens and then how to get around it. So we're going to walk through the worst ways to lie to TypeScript down to the least worst ways to lie to TypeScript, and then how to actually solve one of these problems. I see TypeScript as the analogy I've thought of recently was that it's kind of like your doctor. It's kind of like your code doctor, where if you're at the doctor and it's asking you, or they are asking you, how many drinks you have per week, it might be tempting to lie about that if that number is a little bit higher than it should be. But there's really no reason for that. Your doctor is just trying to help you. And kind of like your doctor, TypeScript, it can't tell you exactly, for a particular bug, it can't tell you the probability that that bug happens or not. Like your doctor can't tell you the probability that your liver fails next week versus 5 years from now or 50 years from now. TypeScript just knows that it could happen. And your doctor knows that if you drink too many drinks all the time for however long, your liver's probably going to fail, and they're just looking out for you. So there's really no reason to lie to them about it, and there's really no reason to lie to TypeScript either. There are exceptions with all things, and we'll get into that. All right, so let me make my face a little smaller. I'll stuff me over here for now. What we're looking at here is a standard Vite app. If you're using Create React app, it will look similar to this. This is kind of the entry point of our React app into the DOM. So if we go to our index file, index.html file, this is all the HTML that is in our app. Pretty standard looking boilerplate, except for these two lines, but we're going to look at this line right here, line 10. This div with the ID of root. And so React is looking for this div, and it's just going to stuff it in here for us, stuff our React app in here. And how it finds it is with this kind of vanilla DOM query, document.getElementById root, and then that's where it throws the React app. And so why are we getting this error? This is an ESLint error. Forbidden non-null assertion. Now this is my particular ESLint setup. If you don't have this plugin, this TypeScript ESLint plugin set up, you won't get this, and it would look fine. In fact, if I disable that, this is basically what besides this commented disable, this is what it would look like when you get it from Vite. They're using this non-null assertion. And so why is it there? Let's take it away. If I look here, argument of type HTML element or null is not assignable to parameter of type container. And then the bottom line is type null is not assignable to type container. If you're curious why it's said twice, this is what TypeScript gives you by default, or what VS Code gives you by default. And then this is a extension called pretty TypeScript errors that parses it a little bit nicer for us. In general, you can kind of scroll to the bottom of a TypeScript error, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to be saying type null or type undefined is not assignable to whatever you're doing. So in our case, getElementById is a function that can return HTML element or null. And createRoot is a function that takes a container of type React DOM.container. Now, if we were to go into that, you would see that HTML element or React element is one of the options of a container. So that's why there's the discrepancy between the names. So basically what it's saying is that this function can either find the element it's looking for, or it can't. And TypeScript has no idea when that's true or not. And the reason why is if we go back over here and we change this to roots instead of root, and I save it, you'll notice here that my app's crashed. It stopped rendering, and we have this kind of ugly error message, uncaught error, create root, target container is not a DOM element. So obviously, because we've just broke it on purpose, we know that create root can't find the element it needs. It can't find any element. This is passing null to this function, and it's saying that, hey, that's not a DOM element. That's not what we're looking for. Now in this case, this error is not really a big deal, and that's why Veed shipped it the way they did. As long as you don't change this ID, it's never going to break. But there is a non-zero risk that happens, and that's why it's better to just handle these cases without lying to TypeScript. Because there are a ton of errors like this where you're going to deal with where null is a much more real possibility, and that's what we're working on solving today. And there is, a chance, like while I was setting up this repo, I accidentally put like an E here or something and then went to another file and got some, it took me a while to find out why that was happening or why I had broken things. So weird things can happen, and we might as well handle this case. So how do we handle it? They, of course, did the non-null assertion. This exclamation point in TypeScript is simply a syntax to say remove null or undefined from the type. And so now it's saying, if we look here at the TypeScript portion, there's not even an error there anymore. It's just the ESLint error there. And basically it just means that this can return a thing or it can return nothing. And then we're saying it can't return nothing. And trust me, bro. And that's basically what these assertions we're about to make are doing, is we're just telling TypeScript, hey, trust me, bro, which isn't always a good idea. So let's start with the worst option to solve a TypeScript error. And that is with tsignore. It's just a comment with this syntax at ts.ignore. And if we highlight this, we can see I have not one, but two different TypeScript errors telling me not to do this. And again, this is because I have a strict setup, but at least two different rules and the recommended setup think this is a bad idea. And if I ignore ESLint, there we go. If I disable ESLint, you see there's no TypeScript errors anymore. This is fine. It doesn't care. Our app works. It's fine. The problem with this is that it is way too broad. Basically what it's doing is it's telling TypeScript to turn off type checking on this entire line of code, the next line of code after this comment. But the problem is we have three different expressions on this line: create root, get element by ID, and render. We're suppressing an error on one of the expressions, but if another error happens on either of these other two expressions, we will have no idea because we're suppressing everything on this line. Now, if I get rid of this again and just hit save, my ESLint setup automatically changes this to tsExpect error, which is the next least worst option. It is slightly better, but it's still not great. And the reason this is red is because this ESLint rule is requiring a comment. So let me just get Copilot to write a comment for me. Let's make it smaller for our work, our use cases today. Okay, so now this is still, well, it's not suppressing errors anymore. Or rather, it's not suppressing type checking anymore. Type checking is still running. We're just saying, hey, we know there's an error on this next line. We are going to ignore it for now, and here's how we do it. But like tsignore, it still does it for this whole line. So if we're expecting a type error here, which we're acknowledging here. But if an error presents on create root or render, we would have no idea because we are expecting error on the line, and it doesn't care where on the line or how many errors happen on that line. So the advantage to this, and the reason that you might see people encouraged to use it, is because it helps you know if something changes. If this stops erroring, then this would now present an error. So if we add our non-null assertion again, pretend like this is not there, it's just ESLint, we're getting a TypeScript error here that this is unused because we told it to expect an error, but it's not. So that's how it's a slight improvement over ignore. Now I do use this in some of my tests when I'll set up some examples in my test with TS_expect_error to make sure that you can't pass the wrong things into a function or something like that. So there are valid use cases, and that's why my ESLint setup allows it with a comment. However, you should really avoid it when you can, and use one of our better choices that we're about to look at. So let me go back to this. So that would be like the fourth worst option or second worst option, I guess. First worst being TS_ignore. So the next worst, or rather the one that's slightly better than the last two, would be to use as any. Now, if you look at any tutorials on TypeScript, they will probably tell you to never use any. And in general, we don't want to use it just for fun. We don't want to use it to like throw away anything, any time TS or TypeScript is presenting an error. Because what's happening here is any is a special type in TypeScript that completely disables type checking. But it only does it for this one expression that we're casting. That's what this means when you use the as in TypeScript, is we're casting. So we're telling TypeScript, hey, we're going to pass this instead of HTML element or null, we're going to pass it as any. And since any has no type checking on it, we can pass it to create root as a container. And the reason it's better than the previous two, TS_ignore or expect error, is because it's more surgical. It's only applying to this expression. It's not applying to create root. It's not applying to render. So if something happens with those two, that error would be presented to us, but this one still is ignored. Now, as any is, I would say it is okay to use when you're fighting a third-party library and you cannot figure out what's going on. It is okay to do this and just move on when you need to. In general, especially as you're learning TypeScript, this is where a lot of people get frustrated, and I don't want fixing every little type error perfectly to slow you down so much that you give up on TypeScript. And so that's where it's okay to use as any. I would say in general, if you're trying to get something done or if you're learning TypeScript, spend about 3 minutes on a type error. Do one Google search, do one ChatGPT prompt, and if that doesn't present the solution quickly, then just do as any and move on. That is okay. One thing you can do to remind yourself to come back to it is we can create this type to do any. I wish I could credit who shared this with me. I just saw it on Twitter somewhere, probably Matt Pocock. You can declare this in a d.ts file, and then this is available in the global scope. And now we can do as to do. And maybe you create a ticket or something to go back through your repo and fix the to-dos. I don't think this works with the comment extension to present, but it would be easy to search, maybe easier than any. And it would also just be a visual reminder next time you're in here, because if it says as any, you may just leave it, or your coworkers may just leave it. But if it says as to do, it might be like, maybe we should try to fix that while we're in here, because it might be easier, or maybe you can figure out the problem, especially if it's a third-party library. Maybe they updated to fix the type issue or something like that. And so I think that's a little neat trick. If you have to move on, just move on. It is okay. It is, as there are worse things in the world than any in TypeScript. Okay, so the next least bad option would be to cast it as the proper type. And so see, this is HTML element or null. Let's just cast it as HTML element, because that does the same thing as the any, except it doesn't disable type checking. If this was like, okay, if we cast this as something totally irrelevant, like a string, we're going to get an error here because string is not assignable to container and HTML element can't really be a string. So it has to be a valid type in here. TypeScript's still trying to help you in this case. Whereas with any, it's just, we're just telling TypeScript to go away for now. And so this is a little bit better. Basically, this does exactly the same thing as the non-null assertion. And so you can do this or this. They're interchangeable. There's a lint rule to turn it off or to do casting. I think it's a little bit more obvious what's happening here when you do this, and I think that's why. But you can use either. It's totally up to you. And I think that's why Vite chose to use the non-null assertion. And that's fine. So we're saying, hey, I know you think this can be null, but I don't think this can be null. And so we're just going to move on for now. And so this is still not great. Casting is still a last resort. All of these options are kind of last resort. We can actually fix this error properly. And so that's what we're going to do now. So if I go to this, how can we tell TypeScript that, or rather get TypeScript to only run this code when the type exists? And that's with type narrowing. It's a technique in TypeScript that we use a lot, or I use a lot. You'll see it all over the place once you understand this pattern. So I'm going to delete this out of here, and I'm going to extract this to a variable. And then pass that variable to our createRoot function. You can see we're still getting the same error, but we just have it abstracted now. And you can see this still returns either an HTML element or null. And what we can do here is we can wrap this in an if block, root, and then save. And voila, that works. So what's happening here is since this can be a thing or a nothing, HTML element being the thing and null being a nothing, the nothing would not pass a truthy falsy check. It would be falsy, and the something would be truthy. So if we just check, hey, is this truthy? Then that means that root exists. And you can see TypeScript thinks that way as well. So if root, so in this block, root is HTML element. And now if we actually hit root outside of here, you can see it's still HTML element or null. Because outside of this block, it doesn't know what this is. But inside of this block, it knows what this is. So one thing to be aware of, if you do it this way, is that if we mess this up so that it's null, when save, you can see our app bombed and no errors were logged in the console. That is worse than earlier where we actually got the error logged to the console, even though we were using the non-null assertion. And so we need to handle the else situation. So we can do else, and Copilot should, well, not quite. There we go. Just throw an error. And you can see this error, if you remember from the one earlier, this one's a lot prettier to me. It's simpler. I can see exactly where this is happening. I know exactly what this means. I would probably write a better error message here to have more context for if and when this happens. And now we have a better error message, and TypeScript is happy. We're not doing any lying or trust me bros to TypeScript. There are some other syntaxes we can use for type narrowing. So if you were in JSX, you would probably do something more like this. just root and. So if this is truthy, then it will run this code. If it's falsy, it will not run that code. Or you could do a ternary and then throw the error here. And that would be kind of the same as the if-else block. Probably, in my opinion, the most elegant way to do this would be to handle the null scenario first. And so we can just go here, if not root, then throw the error. So if root is not truthy, which meaning it does not exist, then let's see if we, let's put it right here. See, root is null. So if it's falsy, then TypeScript knows that it's null here. And if we were in a function and we returned or throw out of this block, here we're not in a function, so we just throw. Then if we go down here, TypeScript knows that this has to be an HTML element. It has to be truthy. Because if it were falsy, if it didn't exist, we would never reach this code because we're throwing this error before we get there. And now if I hit save, we get that same error message when the app bombs out. And if I go back and fix my ID and hit save, we have our little app running back again. And so we solved that in, 3 real small lines of code without having to do that non-null assertion. Again, that non-null assertion is not a big deal. Vite ships it in their template for a reason, because if you don't touch this file or that file, then you'll never run into this issue. However, this was so easy to fix once we walk through the steps that I just don't think it's a big deal. And you can use this type narrowing technique anywhere in your app. It's you'll probably have to use it a lot. I feel like a significant portion of the type errors I'm dealing with are like this, where it's just dealing with the null possibility. If you're in a case where you know for a fact that something can't be null, then there's probably an issue with the types further up in the TypeScript tree. And I would investigate there and see if you can fix it. If it's a third-party library, maybe not. Or if it's another team's code at your company, maybe not. But I would investigate further up to see if you can fix it. And then even if you can't fix the or null, like maybe you can wrap that variable or function or whatever it is and retype it the correct way. So you only have to deal with that null scenario in one place instead of everywhere you use that function or variable. So I hope that was helpful. I'll probably start doing more of these videos. I enjoy talking about TypeScript. I am certainly not an expert, so I would not take anything I said in this video to be factually true. I just love to learn and figure things out and share them with you. And so please experiment with this and let me know if you have any questions or any thoughts. And thanks for watching.